Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy, Americans for Limited Government. And today we're going to be talking about my latest piece. North Korea's missile test happened just as trade talks with China broke down. It is no coincidence. On May 4th, North Korea conducted its first missile test since November 2017. This happened just as trade talks with China were breaking down between U.S. negotiators and Chinese negotiators. And so we're going to kind of look at the timeline here, and it doesn't look like it's a coincidence. These events appear to be connected. And the bottom line is that in order to resolve the denuclearization with North Korea, we probably need to settle trade relations with China. That means no more currency manipulation, no more intellectual property theft. And it appears that China is utilizing North Korea as a nuclear deterrent to prevent the U.S. from achieving concessions in the trade relationship. And obviously, President Trump ran in 2016 on restoring production in the United States, restoring manufacturing in the United States. Since WTO in 2000 and 2001, the U.S. has been losing market share, manufacturing and otherwise. It's been losing labor participation. Our economy has slowed down. We've not grown above 4% since 2000, not above 3% since 2005. That might be changing this year, and it's probably no coincidence that President Trump's policies on trade are factoring in as we start to reduce the trade deficit and bring production back to the United States. So let's talk about North Korea and what's going on here. Now, North Korea has always been a satellite state and ally of China. It's no question they get 90% of their trade is with China. They're absolutely dependent upon China for sustenance, and so China intervened during the Korean War in 1950. China intervened as we were pushing up towards the North Korean Chinese border, and then they pushed us backward to the 38th parallel, and it's been a stalemate ever since. The war never officially ended. So let's look at what happened here. Over the weekend, U.S. trade negotiations with China broke down. They were reneging on the deal. We know now they're according to Reuters. This just came out today. The diplomatic cable from Beijing arrived in Washington late on Friday night. That's May 3rd, with systematic edits to a nearly 150-page draft trade agreement that would blow up months of negotiations between the world's two largest economies, according to 3 government sources and 3 private sector sources briefed on the talks. The document was riddled with reversals by China that undermined U.S. core demands, the sources told Reuters. In each of these 7 chapters of the draft trade deal, China had deleted its commitments to change laws to resolve core complaints that caused the United States to launch a trade war. Theft of U.S. intellectual property and trade secrets, forced technology transfers, competition policy, access to financial services, and currency manipulation. So how could this happen? Well, just hours earlier, on May 3rd, China trade negotiators told the South China Morning Post that trade talks were far from finalized. The story also noted that a social media account used by Beijing, Dowrin Notes, apologies if I'm mispronouncing that, accused the U.S. of trying to rush an end of negotiations, calling it a trick, quote, to increase tensions and generate pressure on the other side. The Post continued, quote, it's the same tactic as the U.S. threatening to raise tariffs. It is merely smoke and mirrors to exert extreme pressure. You don't have to take it seriously. And so it happened as a result of that. You have China saying that they're not going to take any threat to increase tariffs seriously. So President Trump sends Mike Pence out there, Vice President, to state our very strong position. Quote, this is Pence on CNBC, May 3rd. The president believes we're in a very strong position. We could put more tariffs on if we're not able to reach an agreement. The manner in which tariffs would come off is going to be part of the enforcement mechanism, and all of that is subject of negotiations as we talk. And so China says, you're not going to do any new tariffs. You're threatening, you're a paper tiger, you're not going to do that. Pence answers, oh yeah, we will. And so we need to have these negotiations continue. And so what does China do? They send in this redraft of the China-U.S. trade agreement. They delete all the chapters. They make significant revisions. They're reneging on the deal. And then what happens? A day later, North Korea launches its first missile test since November 2017. So is China trying to use nuclear blackmail to exert trade dominance over the entire world? Well, it's hard not to make that connection. Again, China is responsible for 90% of North Korean trade. If the sanctions on North Korea are not going to work without China's assistance, because they're the #1 trade partner. And so North Korea is shooting off missiles and conducting tests just as we're trying to finalize the U.S.-China trade agreement and just as the trade negotiations were breaking down. Now, perhaps North Korea is acting on its own and they're just trying to throw a monkey wrench into the works here. Or they're a vital ally of China and they'll do its bidding, even at the expense of U.S. trade relations. Now, President Trump has responded. He's made good on his threat. We're going to go with 25% tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese goods. That comes on top 25% tariff on 50 billion of high-tech goods. And now they're saying that the Trump administration, that the rest of trade coming from China, that could be subject to tariffs too. This is the right policy. This is the right position. I mean, what we're learning here is that U.S. trade negotiations, U.S. trade relations with China are essential to national security, because the moment you try to create a balance there, suddenly North Korea's shooting off missiles. And that's not a way to conduct relations in the world that we live in. The world's too small for this kind of thing to be going on. And so the president is, he's right. And oh, by the way, I mean, the tariffs would probably be happening anyways, even if North Korea hadn't shot the missile, but mostly because they're reneging on the trade deal. And we have a record trade deficit, $419 billion in 2018. That was a record. And that came with the tariffs that the president has already put into place. I mean, we should be asking ourselves if the tariffs are even big enough to address the flow of production from China and bringing the production back to the United States. It's a real question. This is data from the U.S. Census Bureau. And 2018 was the biggest trade deficit year ever. And so President Trump promised he was going to do something about this, and he's taking a proactive stance, which is the right thing to do. Again, even without North Korea getting involved here by shooting missiles, you have a situation where our production has been outsourced, our manufacturing has been outsourced. President Trump ran in 2016. He won the election on the promise that he was going to start to correct this. And in good faith, the U.S. is engaging in trade negotiations with China. It's engaging in trade negotiations with Mexico and Canada. We have a new agreement, the USMCA. Congress is considering it right now. They should think carefully about it. It has a lot of good concessions. Mexico agreed to the right of collective bargaining for unions. That's unbelievable. They're going to have minimum wages for auto manufacturing, and you're going to increase the amount of parts that need to come in from North America. And so this is and Trump is threatening to leave NAFTA if the new agreement is not agreed to. So that clearly the president is keeping his promises on trade for the good of the U.S. economy. The first quarter just came in. GDP from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, we're growing at 3.2%. Unemployment has hit a 49-year low. Just this past month, we're down to 3.6%. It doesn't get much lower than that, but it probably could go lower with the way things are going economically. So President Trump is negotiating from a position of strength when it comes to the tariffs. We need the tariffs right now. They're going to be an essential part of the negotiation. You have to use your leverage. That's the art of the deal from President Trump. But of course, now markets are getting jittery. You're seeing with the S&P index here that you can see is not able to get above its previous high that you saw back in in September at about 2,900. And here again, 2,900. And so it's starting to tail off. And what the heck happened here? Well, when you look at the 5-day chart, you can see exactly what happened here. Here we were on May 3rd, the U.S. trade talks with China were being finalized, and we were going to push into new highs. And then suddenly they renege on the deal, and then the tariffs are going into place, and then investors are fleeing. They're panicking. And so this is a play, China knows what it's doing. They want U.S. Republican senators and Democratic senators, but Republican senators, particularly from Farm Belt states, to go to President Trump and say, hey, we can't be doing tariffs on China. Then they're gonna put tariffs on our stuff. In the meantime, they're reneging on the trade deal, and their ally, their neighbor, North Korea, is shooting missiles when China doesn't get what it wants out of U.S.-China trade relations. And we can't, even if markets are a little jittery right now, the fact is that this U.S.-China trade deal is essential to national security, and we can't afford to back down right now. I mean, they're shooting missiles. They're challenging us. Should we cave into nuclear blackmail because we think we'll have a better trade relationship? I'll tell you what's going to happen if we do that. We're not going to have a trade deal with China, and North Korea is going to certainly be a nuclear power. So President Trump needs to stick to his guns. He needs to obviously keep working with the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, and pursuit of denuclearization. They want to open up their economy. Well, they're going to need to, join the community of nations and not be, trying to become a nuclear arms power that's going to threaten its neighbors and act as a proxy on behalf of China, trying to exert trade dominance. And if China wants to have a good trade relationship with us, well, that's probably going to be dependent upon reigning in North Korea and being able to acknowledge the legitimate trade differences that we have, whether it's on currency, technology transfer, intellectual property. These are issues that have been percolating for years. They're the reason President Trump got elected. And so this is where we are right now. We're in a very tense situation, but President Trump is leaving the door open for negotiations, and he's exerting pressure, which is absolutely the right thing to do. We need to protect our security. We need to defend against North Korean nuclear arms, and we have to protect our economy from predatory behavior by China when they're in the middle of a negotiation. This is no way to act. And so, anyways, that's the commentary today. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy, Americans for Limited Government. Take care.